The liberty to do as you ought. Powerful stuff here. The Founding Fathers, the men you call Founding Fathers, sought the continued liberty to govern themselves. This a nifty story here that is very seldom told correctly. The founding generation executed a very conservative action. It was not a revolution, even though we love revolution. Yes, we do. But it was not a revolution in the terminology that you think it was. It wasn't rolling the clock forward to go do new cool things like drug yourself out and come to a hotel in Reno, Nevada and not wear any clothes in an elevator. It's doing respectable things like regaining things that they had lost that the British Empire had taken from them. That, ladies and gentlemen, is a conservative action, not a libertarian one. There was nothing new. They desired to get back to where they had come from. This is what is known as a counter-revolution. So the revolution that we're in can also be a very cool and a very, very effective counter-revolution, and I'll try to explain this why. Here's what they were trying to get back to. Prior to 1765 or so, the men and women and children that called themselves Americans in the 13 colonies ran their own governments. They were pretty much free from empire. They had their own local councils. They had their own county councils. They had their own states. Yes, they had royally appointed governors. That's true. But the governor was basically just kind of hanging around, using his royalty, doing things that royal governors do. And the people basically governed themselves. They were very free. They were very independent. And they drew their own geographical lines. They ran their own towns, ran their own stores. They ran everything, and they did it without a lot of fuss. This was life in the prior to being the United States in the United Colonies. This is what life was like. They governed themselves. On around the time of the French and Indian War, boy, why is it wars always precede something screwed up? Things began to change. The British Empire decided that, wait a minute, those colonial guys need to pay us back. What are we going to do? Well, tax these imbeciles. They're just a bunch of knuckle-dragging hick hayseeds living over there across the pond. They won't protest. Big mistake. Some of the other things the founding generation had before there was a founding. They had trial by jury. This was English common law. They all enjoyed it. Trial by jury. This is a great one. You're going to love this one. They also had an understanding that royal troops would not be quartered in their homes. They could not be compelled to quarter royal troops. This means that the chief commandant of the Redcoat Army couldn't come banging on some settler's door and say, hey, I got 5 guys you got to put up for the night. No, by the way, you got to wash their whites too. This did not happen. Now, it did ultimately happen. That was part of one of the reasons why our founding parents revolted. But prior to that action, they didn't have that. Now, let's think about that for just a moment. There's an ongoing debate in this country right now about our troops being stationed in, what did that guy say on Monday night? 900 bases, 135 countries around the world, something like that. We often hear the men and women I call Decepticons, you call them neocons. We often hear them droning on about standing with our strongest ally in the region, right? Well, it has been said by a wise man who just happened to be at that Tea Party Express to Serfdom Monday night that our presence there, where our troops are, I'm not saying, I'm just saying, it may cause those in the region to be just a little angry with us. And of course, when that gentleman said that, what was the result? Anybody want to do an impersonation of what happened when that happened? Somebody said, woo? There was booing. They booed. Why? What, you boo the truth? Remember when you were a little kid and your mother wears brogans? You trade insults. That's when you boo someone. When somebody speaks the truth, you boo them. Especially when you're in government. I thought conservatives, especially the ones that Matt was talking about on TV and radio, are all gung-ho about truth and justice in the American way. Superman flying around. But a little bit of truth leaks out and they get booed. And then little Ricky Santorum has a hissy fit. Now, Ron, You don't understand, Ron. Ridiculous. Then you hear howls of, wow, that's un-American. Ron Paul is un-American, they said about this candidate on this stage Monday night. Let us examine this and compare it to the founding experiment or to the founding era and see who is American and who is not. Around the time I was describing to you, around 1778, during this founding generation, we had this little skirmish with this country called Britain, Great Britain, British Empire as it was known. Well, the Brits decided that they wanted to station some troops with their strongest ally in the region. It was called Canada. So the British Empire stationed its troops with their strongest ally in the region, the Canadians. And what was the reaction of the Continental Army, the Continental Congress, John Adams, George Washington? What did Washington do? Washington sent Benedict Arnold, sent Benedict Arnold to Saratoga. And then from there they launched a campaign to stop this invading army because it was going to come in and it was going to work its way through New York, and it would join up with the rest of the British Army and they would take back New York. I'm being a little loose with the history here, but this is basically how this happened. Now, according to our friends at the American Spectator magazine, this amounted to Washington invading Canada. Oh, but wait, Canada was actually a part of the British Empire at the time. So what did colonial Americans, our founding parents, do when our enemy landed someone near, not in, near where they lived and where they were trying to claim their liberties? What did they do? They put it down. They reacted. But folks, ladies and gentlemen, we're Americans. When we land 100,000 troops in the middle of somewhere in the Middle East, I don't have an atlas here with me to tell you which country they're in today, but those people are just supposed to lay there and take it. But don't pay any attention to those guys. They're Americans. They're supposed to be here. They have this thing called a Declaration of Independence that gives them the right to be here, and some God that they pray to that says that they have the right to be here. On that stage Monday night also, some wise old man said something to the effect of, well, if you were cornered like that, what would you do? You push back. And that's the correct answer. This is another part of why this empire has gotten so big and so powerful. And it's not just the politicians. It's not just your friends, neighbors, and family members that are enlisted in the armies and the navies and what have you. The Navy, by the way, constitutional, should exist. It's not just that. It's the attitude of militarism. It's the attitude that we are no longer identified as the place where liberty reigns, where we are free people, where we exchange goods and services with the rest of the world, and where the people that are trying to escape tyranny and communism and socialism and dictatorships and genocides come to anymore. We are now a shining gun turret on a hill. Ronald Reagan said we were a shining city on a hill. Congratulations, America. You are now a shining gun turret on a hill. How in the heck did this happen? Well, we know how this happened. This began a long time ago, around the time of Theodore Roosevelt and Woodrow Wilson, and has never stopped since. Question to the audience. Do you think that the men that founded the United States of America, went from colonies to states, do you think that they intended to mimic what the British Empire did to them? So who's conservative? I always ask my audience on radio, what do you seek to conserve? I'm a conservative. Mr. Church, I'm a conservative. Really? You voted for Scott Brown. That's great. What are you seeking to conserve? Give me a year. I always answer 1776. I'll take 76. They usually cannot answer the question, because if they answer the question, they're going to say, 1981. Why would you want to conserve 1981, for crying out loud? That's when the debts began racking up. Pick a better year, man. Our founding parents did not intend for this to happen. They were not interventionists. They were gentlemen, they were statesmen, and they knew one thing that all great men should know, Joe Pesci said in a movie, and that's that they didn't know everything. And they didn't know how to go abroad and tell people how to run their own governments. I like to give the example of what would you do if you were enjoying some nice southern Southern hospitality and Southern tea with my good friend Jack Hunter, who's out there in the audience. And y'all was just moseying along in the port of Charleston, South Carolina. And out of nowhere, just wham, boom, there's a bomb. Well, it didn't detonate it, but it has a red Chinese symbol on it. What would our reaction be if the Chinese did that to us? Our reaction would be swift, deadly, and lethal, and it would be justified because we had been attacked. So why do we think that, and I know no one in this room does, but this is for the benefit of those who are watching this outside of this room, why do you think, or how do you think people in other countries should react to this? This is our conceit. This is arrogance here. This is unbelievable arrogance and a lack of humility. Great men are humble. Great women are humble. And like Pesci said in that movie, without honors, because they don't know everything. This is a place that we have to get back into. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a long path. It's a very long path. I'd like to quote something to you. I was just talking about the troops and how they responded to the Canadian threat. I have a letter here that was written in 1774. This is before skirmishes actually began, and this was written by a captain of a militia company in Virginia, and this is what he wrote to his men. See if you approve. Quote, that we will exert every power within us for the defense of American liberty, there's that word again, and for the support of her just rights and privileges, one called forth for the unanimous voice of our countrymen. Everybody agree with that? Sounds pretty good, right? Self-defense. They attack us, we will unite together, and we will stand strong, and we will defend ourselves. Again, we see the Founding Fathers conserving we will stand to protect our liberties. You're not going to come in here and take them from us. If you do, you will meet a musket or a bayonet or a cannon. We're not going to let you do it. This is a conservative action. They conserved their liberty. This is important. This is another example of that counter-revolution, trying to preserve, reverting back to what it was that they had and what it was that they sought to defend. Of course, this was before we had empires and taxes and wars and abuses of civil liberties, which we'll talk about in just a moment. But since the 1930s, let's fast forward again. Since the 1930s, men and women like you have come to meetings like this, and you've sat in here, and you've done, like I said before, rah-rah, and it's all great. I come too. Ladies and gentlemen, these actions have failed. They haven't worked. They have failed in almost every instance. No one in this room has ever lived at a time when government shrank in your lifetime. No one has lived, no one, not a soul. I don't care if you're 130 years old, you have not lived when government has shrank. Yet, we all go to these meetings, we come to these conferences, we support our candidates, and we always tell them to do what? Get government out of my hair. Stop it. Lower my taxes. Well, they don't do it. Why don't they do it? Because there is a culture that is inbred that tells them that they don't have to. People say that, oh, if Congress would only obey the Constitution, if they would only get back to the Constitution, there would be riots in the streets. It would look like Greece and England if they got back to the Constitution, because people have been bred for years, taught, indoctrinated in these indoctrination camps that we call public schools that, oh no, Leviathan's your friend. Government, good. Business, bad. Coercion, good. Liberty, bad. You shouldn't be able to do things that you want to do if they're legal.